the Florida Atlantic Voice, presented by Robes Law Group, ROBES, robeslawgroup.com. You know the deal. They are in the community for you. They are the best freaking personal injury lawyers that you're going to find in South Florida, you're going to find in Florida, maybe in the entire contiguous 48, and maybe we even extend that to all 50 states. Robes Law Group, just like what you put on after you're done in the shower. Robes Law Group, ROBES, robeslawgroup.com, robeslawgroup.com. Slip and fall, automobile accident, motorcycle accident, any personal injury matter, it's Robes Law Group, there to help you, there to protect you, there to help you get what's right in case you find yourself in a personal injury situation, because it's not something you plan, it's not something you anticipate. It's something that just occurs, it happens, and you need someone on your side. Robes Law Group, ROBES, robeslawgroup.com. A couple of orders of business before we dive into the topic at hand, at least what I've set forth is the topic at hand. A reminder, subscribe to the Florida Atlantic Voice podcast, wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcast, TuneIn, so on and so forth, and insert podcast platform here. Even if I've never heard of it, the fact remains, this podcast is there. It's across the entire spectrum. So just please subscribe and leave a 5-star rating, because it helps me and it takes you all of a second and a half. Okay? That's all it takes. And that, again, helps me, and I appreciate it. And my undying loyalty to you because of that cannot be quantified in any sort of financial terms. Just understand that no currency can match my gratitude towards you. One more thing as well. If you can take an additional second and a half, if you could just search JC and Ken, the daily podcast I do with Josh Cohen across all podcast platforms. Please subscribe, rate it 5 stars as well. Again, any podcast platform, and this one actually airs on terrestrial radio as well on Fox Sports South Florida. That's 640 AM. That's 103.1 HD2 on the FM dial. That's the Fox Sports South Florida app, where you listen to FAU football and basketball. Same thing for 640 AM and 103.1 HD2. This is on the Florida Atlantic flagship, so you should already have it preset. You should have already committed this to memory. Fox Sports South Florida app as well, foxsports640.com. The entire thing. That airs at 5 o'clock every single day, but if you miss it, it comes in podcast form every single day. In fact, it's primarily podcast first and on air second. That's the list of priority there. So please subscribe. Please rate it 5 stars. And once again, just to add to the pot, just to make it completely over the top, invaluable, just to make sure that this becomes priceless, my gratitude towards you, my loyalty towards you, my unmitigated love towards you. Just please subscribe to both the Florida Atlantic Voice and to JC and Ken, and rate it 5 stars. And then after those 3 seconds, you'll say to yourself, you know what? I did something very good for society and unbelievably productive today. Now, one more request. I'm leaving you with one more request. Much like a student who is in need of some sort of cranial stimulation, some brain exercise to increase the frontal cortex stamina over the summer after school is let out. I am asking you for suggestions for a summer project. Maybe the proper analogy is you wanting to dig out your own in-ground pool. Godspeed if you do that. I would hire a contractor, but hey, whatever you decide to do, I'm not going to argue it. Maybe it's to build a deck. Maybe you are going to construct your own patio. I don't know. But much like those summer projects, I am looking for Florida Atlantic-related summer projects. So If you want me to do a deep dive into anything from Florida Atlantic's past or anything to do with FAU football here in 2026, if there's anyone specifically you want me to talk to, any story you want me to tackle to deliver to the masses, let me know. Whether it is on Twitter at KLV Says, whether it's on Instagram at Ken Levicka, whether it is via email, klevicka84@gmail.com, or if it's in the comments on YouTube, where this will also be posted for those of you who are more of the visual type. Leave me suggestions. Let me know what you want me to cover. Any summer projects during the course of this long, monotonous summer before we get to football camp starting in late July. I want to thank Big Mike Mareshko, the executive producer and studio host of the Florida Atlantic Football Network. Big Mike Mareshko pointing out to me earlier, actually last week, about the quarterback tier ratings that came out via ESPN. And you know how the deal goes in the offseason. We just have lists and rankings and tiers because that is established, tried and true, click, 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 popular content for the slowest time of the year. David Hale of ESPN put together an exhaustive list because in the offseason, the only thing better than a list is an exhaustive list for you to put your eyeballs on. Ranking all 138 FBS quarterback situations ahead of the 2026 season. Again, David Hale authoring, and this is May 26th, ranking all 138 FBS quarterback situations ahead of the 2026 season. So there are a ton of tiers, okay? Tiers as in Tiers, not necessarily Tears, but with what I'm about to talk about and with my summation of it, it may sound like the Tears version of tiers. And I'll explain and you'll understand what I'm talking about in just a couple of minutes. There are 25 tiers. 25 tiers here in these 138 separate quarterback evaluations based team by team in all of college football, okay? So, for example, tier number 1A are the 4 best quarterbacks in college football. It is titled Room at the Top, and it's now Miami quarterback Darian Mensah, who was at Tulane, then at Duke, then got poached by Mario Cristobal and the Miami Hurricanes. C.J. Carr, Notre Dame, Trinidad Chambliss. He's been in the news lately with Ole Miss, and Arch Manning at Texas because we're going to continue to feel that hype. So that is 1A. There is one quarterback, 1B, great, but also has Jeremiah Smith, the future Hall of Fame quarterback, or wide receiver, I should say, from South Florida. So kind of funny there. Great, but also has Jeremiah Smith, who would make any quarterback better. That's Julian Sayin at Ohio State. Okay, so you get what I'm talking about. Tier 2, are you not entertained? Sam Levitt, LSU, Dante Moore, Dylan Raiola, that quarterback duo at Oregon, Jaden Maiava at USC. Okay, Maiava. Sorry to the Maiava family, by the way, for butchering his name. All right, so you understand what I'm saying here. So I'm sure you know where I'm going here. Where's Caden Veltkamp in these 25 tiers? 25, if you are one of those who are of the Spanish language persuasion. Well, Caden Veltkamp, conventional wisdom would tell you, oh, he's got to be one of the first quarterbacks in the American Conference that is listed in these tiers. Well, you go to tier 10 for the first American quarterback situation, and it is not Caden Veltkamp and FAU. It is USF and Michael Van Buren and Luke Kromenhoek. Those two are going to be battling it out for the starting quarterback position probably deep into August for new head coach Brian Hartline. If you read anything out of USF, you know that neither of those two have so far through spring ball been able to separate themselves from one another. All right, well, USF, they have all that NIL money, and they had a really good year last year, and they've been winning the last couple of years. Fine, benefit of the doubt there. The next time we see an American Conference quarterback after Tier 10 is Tier 16, entitled Won't Back Down. This is Air Noland at Memphis, former South Carolina quarterback. Taven Jackson at North Texas. So Air Noland at Memphis, Taven Jackson, North Texas, and Ja'Curry Brown at Rice. And if Ja'Curry Brown sounds familiar to you, it's because Ja'Curry Brown was with Miami and then with UCF. And things didn't go overly well for Ja'Curry Brown at either spot. Sort of ran his course at both of those places. So now he has made his way to the American Conference, and he is going to play for Rice in that triple option offense there at Rice. Interesting, right? Very, very interesting to see a guy who went from Miami to UCF, pass-happy offenses, now going to Rice. You remember, by the way, Ja'Curry Brown was beaten out by Cam Fancher, former FAU quarterback, for the UCF job last year. So take that for how you will. But then once Ja'Curry Brown took over at UCF, he only played 3 games. He entered the year, in fact, as the number 3 quarterback at UCF. So the point of me bringing this up is that Air Noland of Memphis, Taven Jackson, North Texas, and Ja'Curry Brown, Rice, all of them are in a higher tier than Caden Veltkamp, who had the 3rd most passing yards per game in all of college football last year. Okay? Taven Jackson was with Tennessee and Indiana and UCF before going to North Texas. So you have a bunch of journeymen, 2 journeymen, and then an unproven player who is the backup at South Carolina. That's Air Noland at Memphis. Taven Jackson, who's about to play for his 4th team at North Texas, and Ja'Curry Brown, who's now on team number 3 and couldn't beat Cam Fancher for the UCF starting job last year. They're ahead of Caden Veltkamp. Then there's Tier 17, labeled pretty good in this ESPN quarterback tier ranking. Army, Cal Helms, who's really good. FAU's going to see him. He's really good. And Ryder Burton at UAB. That's right. Lowly UAB. Lowly UAB has Ryder Burton, who is ranked ahead of Caden Veltkamp in these quarterback tiers. So as you can see, this is starting to turn into TEARS for me. I'm turning into a crybaby. Surely in Tier 19 of 25, we'll see Caden Veltkamp, right? Because there's American quarterbacks in there. Nope. Tier 19, titled, You've Come to the Right Place. Navy's Braxton Woodson and Tulane's duo of Zion Chris Gramillion and Caden Samanza. Okay? Now, when it comes to Army and Navy, evaluating the quarterbacks there is a little bit unconventional because they're just different offenses. They're asked to do different things. They're not stand in the pocket and wing it. They're also outstanding athletes who don't shy away from contact. They are going to put a shoulder down. Within those offenses, they're expected to flex their muscles. Blake Horvath, who was just sensational at Navy in his college career. He gives way to Braxton Woodson, who also fits that system perfectly. Every single quarterback that plays at these two institutions, they are a system quarterback. They go to Army, go to Navy, understanding what's going to be expected of them, and they perfect it because they're largely staying 4 years at those institutions, unlike a North Texas who now has a kid on his fourth school going to play quarterback. All right? But Zion Chris Gramillion and Caden Simonza at Tulane, these aren't proven entities, but they are, at least according to the tiers, they're in a higher tier than Caden Veltkamp. We finally get to tier 20, labeled Making Things Happen, and we find, amidst the rest of the QBs in this tier, from Conference USA or the Sun Belt, Caden Veltkamp, FAU quarterback. The same Caden Veltkamp, who had the third most passing yards in a game in America, had the most attempts of any quarterback in the sport as well. 8th most passing yards total if you're scoring at home. This is why, though I think it's unfair, Caden Veltkamp is not going to get the preseason respect as one of the nation's most effective quarterbacks, one of the nation's best quarterbacks, one of the nation's most prolific passers. This is why I believe he's being overlooked and why he is tier 20 in this David Hale ESPN quarterback tier piece of content. Turnovers. Turnovers, 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 turnovers. Period. Exclamation point. And as David Hale points out, and again, tier 20 is way too low. It's ridiculous. And there are not in the American Conference 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 quarterback situations better than what FAU has with a returning Caden Veltkamp. There just aren't. Nobody is going to be able. It can be a PowerPoint. It can be a personal one-on-one demonstration. It can be a Canva creation. There is not anybody who is going to tell me and successfully sway me that there are 8 better quarterback situations in the American Conference than what FAU has with Caden Veltkamp. But it is the dark cloud hanging over Veltkamp with those turnovers, okay? And as David Hale points out, and get this, and this is verbatim, only 5, count them, 5 quarterbacks in the college football playoff era, this is over a decade now, only 5 quarterbacks in the playoff era have had back-to-back seasons with 15 or more turnovers. That list includes Joey Aguilar, App State, Tennessee, Tommy Armstrong, Nebraska, Sam Hartman, Wake Forest, Notre Dame, Josh Hoover at TCU in Indiana, and Veltkamp. Veltkamp has had back-to-back years of at least 15 turnovers, and he's only the 5th quarterback to do it in the last decade plus. That is why Caden Veltkamp is still looked at with skepticism. And I hate it. And I don't think it's doing justice just how excellent a quarterback Caden Veltkamp is, just how profoundly important and message-sending it was that Zach Kittley got Caden Veltkamp to sign on for a second year at FAU. But anytime you're going to bring up Caden Veltkamp in a broad way, the counter is going to be he turns the ball over a ton. And unfortunately, there's not a massive argument against that. There's not much of a rebuttal against that. So Veltkamp, in his final year at Western Kentucky, where he was the Offensive Player of the Year in Conference USA, he threw 10 interceptions. That was actually the most in the league in 2024. And he also lost 5 fumbles that year as well. So there are your 15 turnovers in 2024. And then we know what happened last year. Caden Veltkamp throws 17 interceptions in 2025. And there's the red flag for those like David Hale who are putting these things together. And I get it. It's tough to overlook that. Now, I don't think that should plummet Caden Veltkamp to the 20th tier of 25 in these quarterbacking tiers. But I'm just telling you why it probably happened, and it's because of the turnovers. Now, but Ken, the 4 turnovers he had against Maryland, FAU got down big, and he was just forcing it, and the game got away, and sometimes that just happens. No, you're right. You're 100% right. So let's turn Veltkamp's 4 interceptions against Maryland into just 1. You still have 14. And that still would be tied for the most in the country. Okay? So even if it was 14, you subtract 3 from the interception total against Maryland, he's still at the peak looking down at everybody else in interceptions. And still, that would be tough to just overlook when it comes to forecasting Caden Veltkamp in 2026. Caden Veltkamp also had 6 interceptions in the final 3 weeks of the season. Okay. This is what I think might be the most important number. Because I think it's pretty obvious, and it would be great if this didn't come into play, but just looking at averages, just human nature averages, mathematical probabilities. If you throw the most of any quarterback in college football, you are in all likelihood going to throw the most interceptions in all of college football, or at least a top 5 number in all of college football. That is just a crash course in statistical probabilities, okay? But I think there's something a little more intricate with this. Last year, Caden Veltkamp had the most attempts with that right arm of any quarterback in college football. He had the 3rd most passing yards per game, okay? So naturally, he's probably going to throw a decent amount of interceptions just because he's throwing the ball a lot. But Caden Veltkamp threw 17 interceptions, but only had the 77th most yards per attempt in college football. So you look at 17 interceptions and you say to yourself, surely he's just winging that ball downfield. But anybody who watched the FAU offense last year knows that it is a mix of stretch plays. It is intermediate routes. It is crossing routes. A lot of short passes to intermediate passes, trying to set up the long ball. That's where the concern comes into play. And that's where, for those who are constructing rankings or tiers of quarterbacks in this 2026 offseason, that's where Caden Veltkamp is going to get bad marks. That is the one damning piece of evidence right there. That's the cinder block tied to his ankle. Yeah, he had the most attempts. He had the 3rd most passing yards per game. But he had 17 interceptions thrown, and he was 77th in most yards per attempt. Okay? That is a problem. So all in all, Caden Veltkamp, 3.6 interception percentage. A 3.6 interception percentage. Threw an interception for every 3.6% of the time based on his total passes in 2025. The top 100 quarterbacks in college football last year were all inside of 3%. 2.9% interception percentage is where we saw, and below, is where we saw the top 100 quarterbacks in college football. Keep in mind, there's 138 teams in FBS. And Caden Veltkamp, his interception percentage, even with the prolific passing yards, was in the bottom third. If FAU is to compete for a championship this season, I believe that the interception percentage for Veltkamp has to be inside of 3%. I'm not saying it has to be 1.5%. I'm not saying Veltkamp needs to be top 50 in the country in interception percentage. But what it has to be, based on how many times he's going to throw the football, again, statistical probabilities, average, he's going to throw interceptions. But it can't be 3.6% of the time, and it has to be south of 3% of the time, or else FAU is going to have a really difficult time being into the discussion. They might get to 6 wins, but they're going to have a tough time being into the discussion for an American Conference championship. Because while I don't like the fact that there are 8 quarterback situations ranked better than FAU's in the American Conference, I don't agree with it. I don't think that's the case in reality. That's what outside perception is, and it's not like the American Conference is bereft of quarterback talent because you've got McCown at UTSA. You've got Van Buren and Kromenhoek at USF, and Nolan at Memphis, and Jackson and Brown, North Texas, Rice, respectively, the Army and Navy quarterbacks who are their own discussion. There is a lot of talent there. I don't think they're all better than Caden Veltkamp, but Caden Veltkamp is not going to maximize himself, and this offense isn't going to hit its peak unless the interception percentage is below 3%. That's my opinion from my perch. Now, Zach Kitley might have a completely different outlook on it, but I found myself really bothered by how low, or the low tier we saw Veltkamp in. And after I thought about it further, while I don't agree with it, I understand where the hesitancy comes from to push him higher, at least in the realm of American quarterbacks, for someone like a David Hale, who is an outsider and is looking at records and looking at numbers and sees the turnovers for Caden Veltkamp. Again, 15 or more the last 2 years. One of only 5 quarterbacks to do that in the last decade and a half, and the 17 interceptions last year. All right, so you put all that together, and I think it's pretty safe to say, like any quarterback, but especially with this team, with this offense, with the amount of responsibility on the repaired right shoulder of Caden Veltkamp, those type of numbers mean a ton. And this is not ignoring a defense that needs to improve from a year ago, that showed flashes but was not nearly consistent enough and got beat up on the ground repeatedly. And we'll look at the defense and what needs the biggest improvement in order to help the offensive side of the ball in Caden Veltkamp and try to turn this FAU football team into its fullest form. But Caden Veltkamp, that interception percentage, that's going to be a number to look at all season long. All right? It's at ESPN.com right now if you want to take a look at it, these quarterback tiers written by David Hale. So I just thought that was very, very interesting, and it forced me to take a look at the full scope of the turnovers from Veltkamp over his last couple of years, and especially last year. And there's some context there, and so apply that how you will. This has been the Florida Atlantic Voice presented by Robes Law Group, ROBES, robeslawgroup.com. Damn it, they're so good at what they do. Personal injury lawyers, ROBES, robeslawgroup.com. Slip and fall, automobile, motorcycle accident, anything personal injury-wise, Robes Law Group, ROBES, robeslawgroup.com. Download the Robes app. Ton of helpful stuff on there for you, including if you're in a car accident, you can make note of everything there, store your pictures, make sure you have it, because once the adrenaline wears off, things get really cloudy sometimes, and when we're talking legal, when we're talking lawyers, that stuff really matters, so don't waste any time. Download the Robes Law Group app and make sure that you are taken care of. Robes Law Group, personal injury lawyers, trying to help you even before they represent you in your personal injury situation. Subscribe to the Florida Atlantic Voice Pod, please. The Florida Atlantic Voice Podcast, the only FAU Inside podcast, the most widely circulated and listened to Florida Atlantic-based podcast. Again, Florida Atlantic Voice. Subscribe wherever you get your podcast, or watch it on YouTube, where you can see my bearded face and the same audio you hear on the podcast, but you're just looking at me. Subscribe to JC and Ken if you could. JC and Ken, subscribe to that podcast wherever you get your podcast. It's more of a PG-13 version of me in that realm. It's fun. It's entertaining, and I think you'll appreciate the edge to it and the pop culture references, because myself and Josh are nerds, and boy, do we like to live in the past, and we love to go a little bit retro, if you will. Okay, you're gonna have fun with that. And give me ideas for summer projects for the Florida Atlantic Voice. Any deep dives you want me to take? Closer looks at numbers, closer looks at players, interviews with coaches, interviews with administrators, any sort of stadium news, the latest on rev share, NIL, conference, the American Conference. Let me know. Group of 6. I'm taking on summer projects. I'm taking on assignments for the Florida Atlantic Voice. Thanks for listening, as always. If you have watched, thanks for watching, as always. Friday, it's going to be a podcast full of conviction, and I don't think you're going to want to miss it, because I am about to take the stump. I'm about to take the soapbox for one legend, Mr. Howard Schnellenberger. You're not going to want to miss that. That'll drop on Friday. We'll talk to you next time. This has been the Florida Atlantic Voice, presented by Robes Law Group. Bye-bye.